In the fall of 2021, 10,000 John Deere workers walked off the job, the company's first strike in 35 years. And he won. A 10% raise, an $8,500 signing bonus, and stronger retirement benefits. Ordinary factory workers stared down one of the most powerful manufacturers in America and walked away with a victory, all while Deere was posting record profits. 3 years later, a lot of those same workers opened a very different envelope. Not a raise, a layoff notice. In 2024, John Deere cut 2,167 jobs across its Iowa and Illinois plants. In Waterloo, Iowa, the heart of Deere's tractor empire, workers didn't get hit once. They got hit again and again, at least 6 separate times in a single year. More than 1,000 people gone from one town. And while those pink slips went out across the Midwest, Deere was quietly building a new factory, not in Iowa, not in Illinois, in Mexico. Now, the company will look you dead in the eye and tell you those two things have nothing to do with each other. We're going to put that claim to the test. Because this was never a story about a company running out of money in early 2026, its stock hit an all-time high and management raised its profit forecast. It's a story about who Deere decided to leave behind. The number is 2,167. The destination was Mexico. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why and why the people who built this company never saw it coming. 2,167. Say it slow because that number isn't a statistic. It's a map of the American heartland. That's how many workers John Deere cut across its Iowa and Illinois plants in a single year, 2024. It starts in Waterloo, Iowa, where Deere has been building tractors for more than a century. Waterloo Works is the company's single largest plant. Around 5,000 people clock in there. And in 2024, the layoffs didn't come once. They came in waves, round after round, at least 6 separate cuts, one after another, all year long. By the time the year was over, more than 1,000 Waterloo workers were out of a job from one single town. Then it spread out across the map: Davenport, Dubuque, Ankeny, Ottumwa, Moline, and East Moline, just across the river in Illinois. The cuts even crossed the state line all the way down to a small plant in Coffeyville, Kansas, where just 7 people lost their spots, proof that no corner of Deere's footprint was too small to touch. Down in Ottumwa, the company first offered early retirement to 103 workers in the summer, then idled the plant entirely as the year closed out. And every single one of those notices carried the exact same explanation: reduced demand. Hold on to that phrase because we're going to come right back to it. For these towns, though, the reason didn't soften the landing. When Deere announced yet another Waterloo round in 2024, the city's own mayor, Quentin Hart, said he didn't even hear it from the company. He learned the cuts were coming from the media and had to reach out to Deere himself just to confirm them. Another round, he said, was devastating to our community. And understand, this is a place where John Deere isn't just an employer. It's the employer. When you pull more than 1,000 paychecks out of a town like that, the whole town feels it. The diners, the parts stores, the school budgets, all of it. So here's the real question. What actually happened here? Why did demand for the most iconic machines in American farming fall off a cliff in the first place? To understand that, you have to leave the factory floor and walk straight out into the fields. Walk out into an American grain field back in 2021, and you'd have felt something that had been missing for years: optimism. Corn and soybean prices had rocketed to multi-year highs. Net farm income climbed to roughly $113 billion, an 8-year peak. Money was moving through the countryside again, and farmers did what farmers do in a good year. They upgraded. They bought the biggest, smartest, most advanced machines John Deere had ever rolled onto a lot equipment that runs well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars a unit. That was the high. And the thing about a high that good is how far there is to fall. By 2024, the floor had dropped out. Measured against their 2022 peaks, corn prices were down about 37%. Soybeans down 24%. Wheat down 35%. A farmer who'd built his whole operation around $6 corn was suddenly staring at numbers that just didn't add up anymore. And then came the part most of the headlines skip right over. China, the single biggest buyer of American soybeans on the planet, started walking away. As the trade war escalated and tariffs flew in both directions, U.S. farm exports to China fell off a cliff, down around 39% in a single year. For much of 2025, China bought essentially no American corn, no wheat, no sorghum at all, turning instead to Brazil and Argentina for the soybeans it used to buy from Iowa and Illinois. The world's hungriest customer quietly switched grocery stores. Now, here's the nuance most channels get flat out wrong. On paper, total U.S. farm income actually held up in 2025, but only because it was propped up by strong beef prices and billions of dollars in government bailout payments. The folks who actually got crushed were the row crop farmers, the corn and soybean operations, which just happen to be the exact customers who buy John Deere's biggest, most profitable tractors. So when Deere said reduced demand, this is what they meant. And to be fair to them, it's true. The farm downturn was real. It explains the layoffs. But here's what it does not explain. It doesn't explain why the new factory went up in Mexico. So if the farm downturn explains the layoffs, here's where the story takes its sharpest turn. The one your gut already knew was coming. In June of 2024, in the very same stretch of time those pink slips were landing across Iowa, John Deere made an announcement. It was pulling the production of its skid steer loaders and compact track loaders out of Dubuque, Iowa, and moving it to a brand new plant it was building south of the border, in Ramos, Mexico, target to be up and running the end of 2026. Roughly 600 American jobs across 3 U.S. factories were tied to that single decision. And here's the thing, this wasn't even Deere's first trip across that border, back in 2022. The company had already announced it was shifting tractor cab production out of its Waterloo plant down to Ramos Arizpe, Mexico, a move that put around 250 more Iowa jobs on the line. So now the full picture snaps into focus. On one side of the ledger, layoff after layoff after layoff in the American heartland. On the other, a shiny new factory rising in Mexico. Same company, same window of time. Now, to be fair, and we are always going to be fair on this channel, Deere flatly denies the two are connected. The company's line is firm. The layoffs were about the weak farm economy, not Mexico. They'll remind you they've operated in Mexico since 1952, that they still build their flagship machines like the 9RX tractor right there in Waterloo, and that they've pledged something on the order of $20 billion into American manufacturing over the next decade. The union wasn't buying a word of it. The United Auto Workers, which represents around 10,000 Deere employees, called the cuts an insult to the working class people of Iowa and Illinois and demanded the company bring those outsourced jobs back home instead of chasing cheaper labor across the border. And look, Deere isn't even alone in this. Caterpillar runs major plants in Mexico. Rival CNH just announced it's closing its Burlington, Iowa factory after nearly a century. This is an entire industry quietly drifting south. But out of all of them, it was John Deere, that green and yellow American icon, that caught the eye of the one man who could turn a factory decision into a national firestorm. And he did not hold back. On September 23, 2024, at a round table on a farm in Smithton, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump, then running for a second term, put John Deere directly in his crosshairs. His message was blunt: build in Mexico and you'll pay for it. If Deere shipped that production south, he said, he'd slap a 200% tariff on everything the company tried to sell back into the United States. And his read on the whole strategy was just as sharp companies like Deere, he said, were trying to make a lot of money by getting rid of our labor and our jobs. Just like that, a factory decision in Iowa became a national campaign story. Deere's stock dipped on the threat. And for a moment, it looked like maybe, just maybe, that kind of pressure might drag those jobs back home. It didn't. The Mexico plant kept right on rising. The threat made its headlines, and then the headlines moved on. But here's where the story bends into something almost nobody saw coming. Trump won. He took office in January 2025, and the tariffs did arrive, they just didn't land where you'd expect. On June 4, 2025, his administration doubled the tariff on imported steel and aluminum, all the way up to 50%. Now stop and think about what steel and aluminum actually are to a company like John Deere. They're the raw bones of every tractor, every combine, every machine on the lot. So the tariff that was supposed to punish offshoring instead came down squarely on the equipment Deere still builds right here in America. And this isn't me guessing, this is Deere's own math straight off its earnings calls. The company pegged its pre-tax tariff hit for fiscal 2025 at roughly $600 million. And for 2026, it's projecting that number to roughly double to about $1.2 billion. In one recent quarter alone, tariffs shaved more than 3% clean off the company's equipment margins. So tally it all up. The tariffs didn't stop the Mexico plant. They didn't bring the Iowa jobs back. What they did do was tax the steel going into American factories while, on the other side, the trade war's retaliation gutted the very export markets Deere's farmer customers depend on. Higher costs to build at home, fewer customers able to buy. That's not protection. That's a vise. And yet through every bit of this, John Deere was quietly fighting a second war. Not with Washington, with its own customers. The American farmer. Here's something that sounds almost impossible in America. You can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a machine, own it outright, paid in full, and still not be allowed to fully fix it yourself. But that's been the reality for John Deere owners. See, a modern Deere tractor isn't just steel and diesel anymore. It's a rolling computer. And for years, the software you needed to actually diagnose and repair that computer, a tool called Service Advisor, was locked down, fully available only to Deere's own authorized dealers. So when a tractor threw an error code out in the middle of a field, the farmer who owned it often couldn't clear it himself, and neither could his trusted local mechanic. He had to wait for a Deere dealer and pay a Deere dealer. Now, in most businesses, that's just an annoyance. In farming, it can be a catastrophe. Planting and harvest run on a clock measured in days. A machine that goes down inside that window isn't an inconvenience. It's a lost season, lost yield, lost income you never get back. One Missouri farmer told NBC News that broken down Deere equipment had cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years, much of it just waiting to get the thing running again. Farmers got fed up. In 2022, a group of them sued, accusing Deere of building a repair monopoly. In early 2023, Deere tried to cool the fire by signing an agreement with the American Farm Bureau Federation, promising to open up its tools, in exchange for the Farm Bureau agreeing to back off the push for right-to-repair laws. Critics called that deal toothless voluntary and full of loopholes. Then it got real. On January 15, 2025, the Federal Trade Commission, joined by Illinois and Minnesota, and later Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, sued John Deere outright, alleging the company had illegally cornered the repair market on its own equipment. Deere fired back hard, calling the case flawed and misleading, and in mid-2025, a federal judge refused to throw it out. The breaking point came in April of 2026. Deere agreed to pay $99 million into a settlement fund and to finally hand farmers the digital repair tools they'd been demanding for the next 10 years. But here's the catch. The company admitted no wrongdoing. And the feces' own lawsuit? That one is still standing. So step back and look at the pattern forming. The workers, the towns, and now the farmers themselves. A company that built its entire legend on being the American farmer's right hand kept ending up on the opposite side of the table from him. Which leaves one very uncomfortable question. If the money wasn't going to the workers, and it wasn't saving the farmers a dime, where exactly was it going? If the money wasn't saving jobs in Waterloo, and it wasn't going to the farmers, it went where corporate money usually goes, up. Start at the top. In fiscal 2024, the same year, John Deere cut 2,167 workers. CEO John May received roughly $27.8 million in total compensation. Deere's own filing showed that amounted to about 190 times the pay of the company's median employee. Then look at the shareholders. In 2023 alone, Deere spent more than $7.2 billion buying back its own stock and another $1.4 billion paying dividends. The United Auto Workers calculated that over the past 2 decades, Deere returned roughly $43.6 billion to shareholders through buybacks and dividends. Put the whole picture together. Layoffs across Iowa. A $99 million settlement over repair restrictions. A new factory rising in Mexico. Tens of millions flowing to the executive suite. Billions flowing to Wall Street. That's the contrast that ignited the backlash. Now, to be fair, Deere would tell a very different story. Buybacks and dividends are standard practice for public companies. The company maintains the layoffs were driven by weak demand, not greed, and points to its multi-billion-dollar commitment to American manufacturing as proof. And honestly, both things can be true. The farm downturn was real. Corn, soybean, and wheat markets were hammered. Demand for large agricultural equipment fell sharply. The layoffs weren't imaginary. But here's the twist that changes the entire story. If you've been picturing a desperate company scraping just to stay alive, the numbers tell a very different story. As all of this unfolded, Deere remained highly profitable. In the first quarter of fiscal 2026, the company beat Wall Street's earnings expectations, raised its full-year profit forecast to between $5 and $5 billion, and saw its stock reach a new 52-week high. Construction and forestry, along with small agriculture and turf equipment, were already growing again. At the same time, Deere cut its large tractor inventory to a 17-year low, a sign that management had positioned the company well for the downturn rather than being overwhelmed by it. Now let's stay honest, because that's the whole point. Deere's large agriculture business is in a genuine downturn. Profit in that segment has fallen sharply from its 2023 peak, and tariffs are expected to cost the company roughly $1.2 billion in 2026. This is not a victory lap. But Deere weathered the entire storm from a position of strength. It stayed profitable throughout the slump, maintained one of the strongest balance sheets in the industry, and entered the recovery phase, still generating billions in earnings. So now I want to hear from you. If you're a farmer, a mechanic, or a Deere owner, would you still buy that green and yellow today, knowing everything you've just learned? Drop it in the comments. I read them, and I'll be penning the best ones. And if this breakdown gave you something the headlines didn't, hit that like button, share, subscribe, and drop a comment. We dig into the real stories behind America's biggest companies every single week, and you are not going to want to miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.